The vault door swings open to reveal a staggering void. Inside the heavily fortified subterranean fortress of the Northern Bank headquarters in Belfast, absolute silence replaces the usual hum of financial security. It is the 20th of December, 2004, just days before Christmas. But instead of holiday cheer, investigators are staring into the abyss of the largest bank robbery in the history of the United Kingdom. A mind-bending £26.5 million has completely vanished into the freezing winter night. To comprehend the sheer scale of this theft, imagine mountains of crisp banknotes completely evaporating from a locked room. There are no shattered concrete walls. There are no melted steel beams from thermal lances. There is no lingering smell of heavy explosives or chemical smoke hanging in the stagnant air. The physical perimeter of the Belfast headquarters remains entirely unbreached. Detectives frantically search for any signs of forced entry but find perfectly intact security doors and untouched biometric scanners. The electronic alarm systems never triggered a single warning to the local police dispatch. It is as if a highly organized team of phantoms simply walked through solid walls and calmly carried away millions in heavy cash. How does a criminal enterprise bypass one of the most sophisticated financial security networks in Europe without firing a single gunshot? Street thugs rely on brute force and masks to terrify bank tellers during daylight hours. But this operation is entirely different. This strike demonstrates a chilling level of intellectual dominance over the entire banking system. The perpetrators understood that human psychology is always the weakest link in any fortress. Outside the bank building, the dark streets of Belfast offer absolutely no useful clues. There are no abandoned getaway vehicles left burning in alleyways. There are no panicked witnesses reporting heavily armed men fleeing into the cold night. The masterminds behind this incredible heist orchestrated an invisible symphony of crime. They meticulously mapped out every single contingency, ensuring their massive financial extraction remained completely hidden from public view. Stealing £26 million is not merely a matter of grabbing loose cash. It requires extraordinary physical logistics. That amount of paper money weighs thousands of pounds and demands significant cargo space to transport. The gang had to maneuver heavy commercial vehicles into the highly monitored city center without raising any suspicion. They operated with the cold efficiency of a legitimate logistics company, fulfilling a massive corporate order. News of the staggering loss sends immediate shockwaves across the entire United Kingdom. Financial markets tremble as executives realize the ultimate vulnerability of their supposedly secure cash reserves. Media outlets broadcast breaking updates globally, turning the devastated Northern Bank into an overnight symbol of catastrophic security failure. Millions of citizens are captivated by the bold audacity of the unknown thieves who managed to humiliate the government so thoroughly. Seasoned investigators stand inside the sterile vault, completely overwhelmed by the profound absence of forensic evidence. There are no stray fingerprints left on the cold metallic shelves. There are no dropped tools or discarded masks lying on the pristine floor. The perpetrators treated the crime scene like a delicate surgical theater. They maintained absolute discipline from the very first minute to the exact second they vanished into the shadows. To solve this impossible puzzle, detectives must look beyond the concrete walls and the sophisticated electronic alarms. They must understand the fundamental architecture of modern banking. Bank vaults are designed to resist external physical attacks, but they are incredibly vulnerable to internal manipulation. The brilliant masterminds understood a terrifying truth. If you control the people holding the keys, you completely control the impenetrable fortress without firing a single shot. The investigation quickly pivots from analyzing broken steel to interrogating human targets. Slowly, a horrifying narrative begins to emerge from the shattered lives of the bank employees. The perfect crime was not an impulsive midnight break-in. It was a terrifying psychological siege, launched days before the cash actually moved. The invisible criminals effectively turned trusted financial executives into unwilling pawns in a deadly high-stakes game. This was no ordinary gang of greedy thieves looking for a quick retirement fund. The level of coordination required points directly toward a highly structured paramilitary organization. Only a syndicate with deep roots and massive intelligence gathering capabilities could successfully monitor and threaten high-level banking officials so effectively. The authorities soon realize they are dealing with seasoned veterans of a shadow war that has plagued the region. The empty vault in Belfast is merely the final act of a brilliant and ruthless conspiracy. To truly grasp the magnitude of this historical event, we must rewind the clock and examine the volatile political landscape of Northern Ireland. Behind the staggering sum of stolen wealth lies a dark history of violent conflict, hidden motives, and a desperate struggle for power. The greatest heist in British history is about to unfold. To understand the true nature of this monumental heist, we must step outside the empty vault and look at the streets of Belfast. In late 2004, Northern Ireland is navigating a highly delicate and fragile peace process. Decades of brutal sectarian conflict known as the Troubles are supposedly fading into history. However, the dark shadows of underground paramilitary organizations still loom heavily over the recovering political landscape. The sheer logistical perfection of the Northern Bank robbery immediately points law enforcement toward a terrifyingly familiar adversary. Ordinary criminal syndicates do not possess the vast intelligence networks required to execute such a flawless and massive operation. The British and Irish governments quickly direct their intense scrutiny toward the Irish Republican Army. This highly disciplined paramilitary group possesses the exact tactical experience needed to orchestrate this specific level of chaos. For decades, this underground army fought a bloody guerrilla war against British forces utilizing highly sophisticated espionage and coordinated strikes. They understand precisely how to gather deep intelligence on high-value targets without ever being detected. Their operatives are rigorously trained to maintain absolute silence and strict military discipline under extreme pressure. Stealing millions from a fortress requires the exact same skill set used to orchestrate a complex covert military campaign. Financial greed is rarely the sole driving force when dealing with deeply entrenched political armies. A staggering sum of £26 million serves a much darker and more strategic purpose. This massive injection of untraceable cash can fund covert operations and secure political influence for many years. It is a highly calculated move designed to ensure the survival and the enduring dominance of a shadow government operating behind closed doors. The timing of this devastating strike is incredibly deliberate and politically explosive. It occurs just as vital negotiations are taking place to solidify the newly formed government structures. By executing the largest robbery in British history, the masterminds deliver a chilling and undeniable message to the authorities. They are proving that despite the ongoing peace treaties, they still possess the terrifying power to bypass state security and strike at will. The immediate political fallout threatens to completely derail the fragile peace agreements. Trust between the negotiating parties instantly evaporates as furious accusations fly across the political divide. Sinn Féin, the political party historically linked to the Republican movement, faces intense and aggressive questioning from the media and rival factions. The invisible architects of the heist successfully weaponized a bank robbery to inflict massive collateral damage upon the entire democratic process. The masterminds sitting in their hidden command centers view the shattered bank vault as a monumental strategic victory. They do not view themselves as common thieves stealing paper money for personal luxury. They consider themselves hardened soldiers, securing vital resources for an ongoing political struggle. This dangerous ideological justification removes any lingering moral hesitation. It allows them to execute their terrifying plans with absolute coldness and ruthless efficiency. To secure this massive war chest, the syndicate needed to exploit a very specific vulnerability within the Northern Bank. They spent countless months conducting extensive surveillance on the daily routines of the top executives. They identified the crucial managers who held the digital codes and the physical keys to the subterranean vault. The gang meticulously mapped out family structures and residential addresses to prepare for the ultimate psychological siege. The brilliant strategists understood that breaking through reinforced concrete and steel doors was a foolish and impossible endeavor. The modern security perimeter was far too strong for brute force explosives. The only viable path to the £26 million was to capture the human minds that controlled the impenetrable fortress. The stage was finally set for a deeply terrifying home invasion that would silently break the bank from the inside. As the freezing December winds swept through the quiet residential neighborhoods of Belfast, the Shadow Army prepared to strike. They dispatched highly trained tactical teams to the suburban homes of two senior bank officials. The victims were entirely unaware that their peaceful family lives were about to collide violently with a ruthless political conspiracy. The greatest heist in history was fundamentally built upon a foundation of absolute human terror. The quiet Sunday evening of December 19th is shattered when strangers knock on the doors of two separate suburban homes. Heavily armed men disguised as legitimate police officers violently force their way inside. They quickly overpower bank executives Kevin McMullen and Chris Ward inside their own living rooms. The terrifying psychological siege instantly begins. The ruthless intruders do not demand the personal wealth of the terrified families. They bring detailed photographs and chilling instructions revealing a much larger and darker objective. The families of both executives are violently separated and transported to unknown and isolated locations. The masterminds establish absolute psychological dominance by holding innocent loved ones as leverage. The instructions delivered to the captive bank officials are brutally simple and horrifyingly clear. They must go to work on Monday morning and perform their standard duties exactly as usual. If they alert the authorities or display any signs of panic, their captive families will be immediately executed. The invisible ticking clock begins. Monday morning arrives, bringing an unbearable level of silent agony for the two desperate men. They walk into the bustling Northern Bank headquarters, wearing their professional suits but carrying a crushing invisible weight. They must smile at colleagues and attend routine meetings while their wives are held at gunpoint in freezing abandoned locations. This cruel psychological strategy is the absolute genius of the entire criminal operation. The impregnable security system relies entirely on the loyalty and the calm rationality of its human operators. By completely shattering that mental stability, the masterminds effectively bypass every single electronic sensor and biometric scanner protecting the subterranean concrete fortress. As the official business day slowly concludes, the remaining bank staff pack their bags and head home for the holidays. Ward and McMullen remain inside the rapidly emptying building, claiming they have end-of-year administrative duties to finish. The massive financial institution becomes deadly quiet as the final phase of the masterstroke initiates. Under the cover of winter darkness, a seemingly ordinary white commercial van pulls into the secure loading bay of the bank. The two compromised executives utilize their high-level security clearance to grant the vehicle direct access to the restricted subterranean levels. The Phantom Strike Force finally enters the impregnable fortress without triggering any alarms. The heavily masked operatives step out of the van, moving with the silent and lethal efficiency of a military squad. They do not carry heavy explosives or drilling equipment because the thick steel doors are already unlocked. The terrified executives have disabled the internal security perimeter, granting the thieves completely unrestricted access to the treasure. Inside the massive vault, the gang works with astonishing speed and absolute physical discipline. They completely ignore small denominations and focus entirely on the massive pallets of newly printed banknotes. These crisp and uncirculated bills are bundled tightly, making them incredibly dense and highly efficient to transport out of the targeted financial institution. The physical labor required to move 26 million pounds is absolutely monumental. The men load heavy crates of cash into the waiting white van, pushing the vehicle's suspension to its absolute maximum limit. They work in total silence, communicating only through precise hand signals to ensure the terrified hostages outside remain completely compliant. There is no rushed panic or chaotic scrambling during this massive wealth extraction. The operatives execute the loading process like a perfectly choreographed industrial assembly line. They know the police are entirely blind to their actions because the two highest-ranking officials are actively covering their tracks inside the secure control room. By the time the massive white van rolls out of the underground loading bay, the greatest heist in British history is fully complete. The silent ghosts vanish into the freezing Belfast night, carrying an unimaginable fortune in untraceable paper currency. The terrified bank managers are left standing inside the completely gutted concrete vault. Hours later, the kidnapped family members are finally abandoned in remote freezing forests miles away from the city center. The traumatized victims manage to escape their bindings and desperately contact the local authorities. The sheer magnitude of the catastrophic security failure finally dawns upon the highly embarrassed police forces scrambling to secure the area. The sun rises over Belfast, revealing the terrifying magnitude of the overnight financial slaughter. Local police and federal intelligence agencies immediately swarm the completely empty subterranean vault. The initial wave of law enforcement operates in a state of absolute disbelief. They are desperately hunting for a single microscopic mistake left behind by the disciplined phantom operatives. But the sterile crime scene offers nothing but mocking silence and cold steel. Forensic teams meticulously dust the empty metal shelves and vacuum the pristine floors for any trace of biological evidence. Their exhaustive efforts yield absolutely zero usable clues. The brilliant masterminds force the terrified bank executives to handle the heavy physical labor of loading the cash. The actual thieves never even touch the interior vault surfaces, ensuring their absolute invisibility from the desperate investigators searching for a breakthrough. A massive and unprecedented international manhunt is instantly launched across the United Kingdom and the neighboring Republic of Ireland. Heavily armed checkpoints randomly appear on major highways while helicopters scan the freezing rural landscapes for the heavy white van. Border crossings are completely locked down as desperate authorities attempt to trap the millions before the money disappears forever. The entire island is placed under a state of high tactical alert, but finding £26 million of stolen currency is incredibly difficult when dealing with a highly sophisticated paramilitary network. The syndicate utilizes deeply entrenched smuggling routes, established over decades of brutal underground conflict. The massive mountain of crisp banknotes is quickly broken down into smaller, manageable packages and scattered across numerous hidden safe houses. The trail goes completely cold before the police even begin their frantic search. The criminal investigation rapidly transforms into an incredibly toxic political crisis. Senior police officials hold explosive press conferences, publicly pointing their fingers directly at the Irish Republican Army. They declare that only a highly structured shadow military possesses the necessary resources and strategic discipline to execute such a flawless operation. This bold public accusation sends massive shockwaves through the delicate corridors of political power in London and Dublin. The fragile peace negotiations designed to end decades of brutal violence are instantly suspended. Trust between the bitter political rivals completely evaporates overnight. Unionist politicians furiously demand that Sinn Féin be completely expelled from the democratic government structure. The brilliant architects of the bank heist successfully utilized stolen paper money to effectively detonate a massive political bomb right in the middle of a historic diplomatic ceasefire. The accused paramilitary organization immediately issues a strong public denial, rejecting any involvement in the massive financial crime. However, the intelligence agencies remain absolutely convinced of their hidden guilt. They realize they are fighting a dangerous ghost enemy that operates completely outside the normal boundaries of law and order. The frustration within the investigative task force reaches a boiling point as weeks turn into agonizingly silent months. Detectives launch aggressive raids on suspected underground strongholds, desperately trying to find the missing millions. They arrest multiple individuals associated with known Republican smuggling networks and intense money laundering operations. But connecting these shadowy figures directly to the terrified bank managers and the empty concrete vault proves legally impossible. The brilliant compartmentalization of the criminal syndicate ensures that the absolute core masterminds remain completely untouchable. The largest criminal investigation in Northern Irish history effectively hits a massive, impenetrable brick wall. The authorities possess strong suspicions and detailed intelligence reports, but they lack the hard physical evidence required for a major federal conviction. The invisible standoff between the frustrated state police and the brilliant criminal masterminds continues in the dark. The £26 million question remains completely unanswered as the trail fades away. The sheer audacity of the Northern Bank robbery leaves an indelible mark on the international law enforcement community. It serves as a terrifying case study, demonstrating how deeply entrenched political conflict can seamlessly merge with high-level organized crime. The invisible thieves successfully executed a flawless masterstroke that humiliated the entire British security apparatus. Their dark legend grows stronger with every single day that the stolen millions remain missing. Years pass without a single direct conviction for the actual robbery. The massive federal dragnet catches a few low-level operatives involved in complex money laundering schemes across the island. However, the brilliant masterminds who orchestrated the terrifying psychological siege remain completely free. The ultimate architects of the greatest heist in British history successfully outsmarted the entire criminal justice system. The criminal syndicate possesses £26 million, but spending the stolen wealth proves incredibly difficult. The massive pile of cash is heavily monitored and completely useless if it cannot be integrated into the legitimate economy. In a drastic and unprecedented defensive maneuver, the Northern Bank decides to launch a financial counterattack against the invisible phantoms holding the stolen treasure. The executives announce a total recall of every single banknote bearing the Northern Bank logo. They redesign the currency with new colors and vastly upgraded security features to completely invalidate the stolen millions. Millions of citizens are forced to exchange their old cash before a strict, absolute deadline. The bank essentially attempts to turn the massive stolen fortune into worthless scrap paper overnight. This aggressive corporate strategy initiates a desperate race against the ticking clock. The criminal syndicate mobilizes its vast underground network to rapidly launder the money before the deadline expires. Dark figures purchase real estate and luxury goods, using bags of crisp cash across various European cities. The shadow war shifts from the streets of Belfast into the complex global financial system. Law enforcement agencies occasionally seize small fractions of the stolen loot hidden inside abandoned vehicles or buried in remote fields. But these scattered recoveries represent merely a tiny drop in a massive ocean of missing wealth. The vast majority of the £26 million is successfully absorbed into the dark economy or burned to ashes. The exact fate of the mountain of cash remains a profound mystery. The severe political shockwaves eventually subside as the fragile peace process slowly regains its footing over the following years. The intense public accusations against Sinn Féin fade as diplomatic negotiations resume behind closed doors. But the deep psychological scars left by the flawless bank heist permanently alter the landscape of Northern Irish politics. The shadow of the invisible army continues to linger over the newly formed government. The Northern Bank robbery becomes a permanent and chilling stain on the global security industry. Corporate executives realize that no amount of thick, reinforced concrete can ever protect them from compromised human elements. The terrifying tactic of tiger kidnapping forces major institutions to radically redesign their employee protection protocols. Financial fortresses are quietly rebuilt to remove absolute control from vulnerable human hands. The Belfast Vault remains a haunting symbol of criminal perfection and tactical superiority. It stands as a dark monument to a heavily structured paramilitary group that successfully executed an impossible civilian target. The masterminds achieved absolute victory by weaponizing fear and completely neutralizing the minds of their victims. They proved that true power lies in exploiting the fragile human psyche rather than breaking solid steel. Today, the freezing winter night of the Great Heist feels like a distant cinematic legend. The exact identities of the phantom operatives who drove the heavy white van away remain securely locked within the criminal underworld. The brilliant architects of the perfect crime are likely walking the streets as free men enjoying their dark retirement. They successfully committed the absolute ultimate robbery and completely vanished into the freezing fog. The incredible story of the £26 million ghost heist continues to fascinate and terrify security experts worldwide. It is a harsh reminder that the most dangerous threats do not always arrive with heavy explosives and loud demands. Sometimes the greatest villains simply knock quietly on a suburban front door and politely ask for the keys to the entire kingdom.